Hello and welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt, and this week we are being joined by Dayna Goldstein. Dayna is a professor of English at Texas A&M University in Texarkana, Texas. Professor Goldstein is a neurodiverse individual with a different perspective than we've heard on the podcast in previous episodes. I would like to welcome Dayna Goldstein to the Autistic Me.
Thank you, Chris.
So, Dayna, one of the things we talked about in show prep was that you are a neurodiverse individual with a different perspective from the stereotype that is often presented. So let's talk about how you aren't the stereotype of neurodiversity.
Well, I think there are a couple of ways that we can take that question, and thank you for asking it. It's really important that people understand that neurodiverse isn't just one thing. So for me, I am not an autistic person. So I'm not neurodiverse in that way. I am a dissociative person. So my brain has had trauma and then therapy and help, and then it expanded. And now I think differently. Now my brain is different, and I'm neurodiverse in that way. So it's not only autism that is neurodiverse. The other thing I think I can maybe add to your already fine discussions here is that I'm a female and I identify as one, and I often wear skirts and dresses. I am not an IT person. I'm not heavily good at technical things. I do like to be involved in system work, and I do design many systems. However, I don't feel like I fit that kind of typical left alone, she'll just work herself into a corner sort of thing, because I don't do that. I enjoy life very much.
And in terms of being neurodiverse, the common misperception, as you mentioned, is that the neurodiverse individual is in a STEM field: science, technology, engineering, math. And you find yourself in the English language arts. Could you explain how you found yourself on that career path?
Well, it was interesting because I was not compelled, and I remain not compelled to much fiction. I mean, I do read it and I do like it, but I never wanted to teach it. I never wanted to, get involved in telling people how they should interpret or not interpret things and trying to justify that sort of thinking. I didn't find any insight into it. But I really liked language, and I really saw how much language contributed to systems of power and meaning in people's daily lives. So it's because language, I think, is one of those macro systems. And I found my way up through comm. So my bachelor's is in MatComm, in organizational communications in specific. Then my master's is in the Rhet Comp field. And then my PhD from Kent State is in literacy, rhetorical theory, and social practice. And so my way through to become a writing professor wasn't terribly artsy, but it was about meaning, much more so than kind of a technical skill.
When you found yourself attracted to teaching, did you struggle with the idea that teaching is a very social environment?
I did. And it was very hard for me to want to be in it until I understood about what it means to be an expert. And I undertook the desire to become an expert in a very serious fashion, because I felt like as a teacher, my credibility couldn't rest on my social skills, that I really had to know what I was talking about. And so I very much invested myself in expertise.
How did you find navigating graduate school and even undergraduate as a neurodiverse individual when those environments themselves are social in nature, including interactions with peers, faculty, advisors, and so on?
I've never had more than a few close friends at a time. I have a small handful of people around me who very much care, and that's always been great. And I've always kind of accepted that the other people, they're just going to be acquaintances. And as long as I don't have to get too much beyond small talk with them, I can avoid the painful stuff. So I've really done it by allowing different layers of closeness to me. I have kind of a way of letting people in so they are comfortable at various stages of getting to know me.
And could you expand on how your neurodiversity differs from what universities typically anticipate when they hear that a faculty member or student is going to be neurodiverse?
A little pick at your question. I don't know that universities anticipate this at all. I don't know that they anticipate neurodiversity very well, largely. But certainly, I would say, in terms of me, they don't anticipate the philosophy. They don't anticipate that. I think many of us who are neurodiverse have really thought about it, and we're just not walking around with a random label on us waiting to be helped. And that we really understand the way we think and what we do very often. And if you were not disabled in the same way you would think of a bodily handicap.
I've noticed a number of universities setting up neurodiversity training for faculty and support staff focus on checklists that are commonly referred to as Asperger's lists. And I don't fit those lists. My diagnosis was brain trauma with autistic traits resulting. And so they're training for a very narrow understanding of neurodiversity. And I don't think they are prepared for someone who doesn't fit that narrow checklist.
Right. And I want to be careful about they, because on the one hand, the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, the actual people in my department and in the college, they're actually really amazing and kind and wonderful and open people. But the institutional structures themselves are not so welcoming and not so kind and not so open.
And I think that is where we get into the issue of training and staff development. When it is highly focused instead of generalized, it becomes its own mechanism for reinforcing stereotype. And what I've wondered is if the training needs to be broadened by listening to more voices and more understanding of what neurodiversity is, so our colleagues in education can serve a broader audience of students and even colleagues who don't fit those nice checklists.
Right. I don't know that I would take the checklist approach. I'm not certain that that's going to be the most helpful. I think we need something maybe more direct about brain science.
And when you talk about how your brain was shaped, in my case, it was shaped rather literally by physical damage. But what a lot of people seem to not understand is that early life experiences, or even later life experiences, in the case of PTSD, can have a lasting effect on the chemical structures and on the neurology of an individual.
Very much. And ongoing plasticity affects that too. Your brain just isn't changed and then stays. Your brain is changed and then you grow as a person and encounter new experiences and do new things. So, and if you get help, and I was very fortunate, I was able to get pretty good help, that, I had CBT that taught me a lot about how to think. Right? And so the treatment in ways expanded my brain as much, if not more, than the actual initial trauma.
And when you talked about receiving supports, did those supports continue through high school and into college, or were they primarily at the younger ages?
I received support, really good help throughout all of my high school.
And do you find that you take what you learned personally to help students that you meet who are neurodiverse?
Yes, I do, because I don't think the scholarship out there really has hit it yet.
What should we be doing to understand neurodiversity better within not just education, but society as a whole, where we are now seeing a neurodiversity movement that is highly localized within the autism self-advocacy movement?
Well, I think we need to back up and understand brain science a bit and neurology a bit. I think people are very determined to rush to help and which is kind, right? They're trying to be kind, but they're very determined to rush to the end and say, well, you don't think right. What accommodations can I give you to make you think right? And I don't think that's the solution. I think the solution really, or maybe that's not the long-term solution. I think the long-term solution is more like we need to be more understanding of neurology and brain chemistry and brain trauma, and careful with our mental illness terms.
One of the things you said I find interesting is you don't think right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like I've gotten that message as a neurodiverse person.
That somehow the way you approach a problem is the least efficient or the improper way to approach the problem?
That it's the improper way or non-standard way to approach the problem, which, okay, maybe it is, but that doesn't mean it's a wrong way or a way that doesn't yield tremendous insight.
And we have talked about presenting potentially to other colleagues at national conference, and we've talked about broadening our voices and getting them heard. How do you view that when an instructor is open about his or her special needs and is not just teaching students, but is also openly an advocate for a cause?
That's hard for me. My political opinions tend to be a little centrist. I'm a moderate. So big gestures to me are a little harder to handle. But I don't think you should lie. I don't think it comes up a lot. And I don't bring it up in class unless someone else does. But if someone else does, I'll certainly discuss it. But for me, it's not a forefronted issue in my classrooms. If it comes up, it comes up, and I'm certainly honest and open and willing to talk to students. But if it doesn't, it kind of doesn't, and I'm okay with that too. I don't know that the kind of advocacy that we see around other identity groupings is the right kind of advocacy for this particular issue.
One of the things that I have encountered when I was working on my master's and then my PhD, I was told, well, you should be in disability studies. And a friend of mine who is African American mentioned that he studies world religions, and he was told, well, you should be in African American studies. This idea that you should be studying what you are, I don't know, it seems to be endemic within the humanities, when what I like to study is design and typography and how language is presented to audiences digitally. And here I am being told, oh, well, then you should look at how disabled people use technology. I'm like, no, you're missing my point.
I think the desire to self-actualize is really important, and I appreciate anyone who wants to do that. I don't always necessarily think that the academic research sphere is the necessary way to do that. I mean, it's certainly one way, and I mean, I feel the same way. People often say, well, why don't you talk more about this? Because it's not what I love. But it certainly informs my thinking. I mean, when I think about methods, or I think about assessment, or I think about design, all things that are big in my thinking, I'm definitely coming from the neurodiverse perspective that I think with. And I would never say, no, I'm thinking in a neutral fashion, or no, I'm, thinking about purely what's true, or something like that. I'm coming at it from my own angle. But that doesn't invalidate the other things that I'm interested in.
So you teach rhetoric and composition at the university level?
I do. I teach a lot of, intro stuff, Comp 1, Comp 2. I also teach our 3000 level classes. So we have, it's a small school, so we just have a few, technical writing. I'm teaching that this summer now, actually. I'm teaching a grant writing class this summer. I teach in the MA thing here. I really like the methods course, and I really like the language and linguistics side of things.
So in some ways, the nonfiction and the factual forms of expression do appeal to you and your sense of order.
They do. And I think, yes, they do. I did, like I said, I did not come up through the literature side of the house. All of my degrees are in communications. I'm interested in language and power and symbol systems and how we evaluate those and how we make meaning amongst society with those. Language as a system is what interests me.
I find that fascinating because frequent guest Daniel Sansing, who is also an instructor in English, we have talked about how because I am in typography, design, and technical communication, I tend to be assigned to English departments. Trying to explain to a literature person that you study typography, they're like, well, the art department is over that way. So when you bring up semiotics, they're like, well, philosophy is over there. Literature seems to still dominate writing programs and English departments. So sometimes you have to explain what it is that you do, and it feels sometimes like we're trying to still earn professional respect.
Yeah, I think in some places that's very true. I am very fortunate that at my campus we don't have any of that. You have to understand it's a tiny school, so we know everyone. There are 3 lit profs and 3 rhet comp profs, and we respect each other's expertise, and it's really a wonderful place. I feel very fortunate, like I found my little slice of heaven.
So there aren't 144 adjuncts.
No, it's one of the benefits about being at a small institution, of course, is that you get to know the people that you work with. And I work with some very, very good people who understand that literature is not all of English, and the rhet comp people respect what the lit people do. And, I just have one of those miraculous departments where people are pretty agreeable.
I have had a wonderful time talking with Professor Dayna Goldstein. She's at the University of Texas A&M at Texarkana in Texas. We are going to be joined again by Dayna in an upcoming episode talking about real-life issue of living arrangements, buying a house, renting an apartment, and all of the challenges that come along with moving into a new place. I want to say thank you once again, Professor Goldstein.
Yes, sure. Thank you for having me.